here. So thanks for this opportunity, Igor. I've been teaching for quite some time now, probably 20 years or so, and I have to say that I am having more fun right now than I ever have in my entire career, and it's just been. Uh, and I enjoy talking about the types of things that I'm doing because I'm constantly learning stuff and trying stuff, and so it's been a great adventure. Um, just a couple of quick notes before I jump in. One, everything that I'm going to talk about today on flipping my classroom. So this is stuff that I did pre-COVID. I'm going to be back what I think is in 2 weeks, Igor, where we're doing a panel discussion on online teaching and kind of what happened. I never done anything online prior to COVID, and like everyone else in this room, I was just thrust into it, and honestly, I have to say I just kind of lucked out because of the things I'm going to talk about today. Just fortunately made for an incredibly seamless transition in online teaching. So I'll be commenting on some of that stuff in a little more detail next week or in a couple of weeks. So today I'm just going to try to talk more kind of philosophically on the flipping thing and then practically how I did it. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to mention is I do these review sessions on Fridays, and so right now I'm actually sitting in a classroom. I'm between my 11 o'clock review session and my 1 o'clock review session, and so most likely as we are concluding today, I'm going to have students that are kind of storming into my classroom. So I may be waving my hands and welcoming them in while I'm talking. So that's what's going on there. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I put together a few slides just to kind of talk about how I think about flipping my classroom, and I want to tell a little bit of the story of kind of how I did it. And so I'll get all that out there, and then I'm hoping we can have some time for discussion and questions after we're done. And then also once we're done here, I'll be sending Igor, I'll be sending you some resources that maybe you can pass along to anyone that has more questions or wants to talk more. Okay, so I just want to start with background. So I spent a lot of my career working in what I would call a traditional lecture model format. And so, I mean, I'm up at the front talking, people are sitting around listening. There's some interaction, but it's mainly, more monologue than dialogue. And that's what I did. And I would say that by many measures, I did it pretty well. I was proud of kind of how things were going. But at the same time, I was always kind of scratching my head and asking myself, well, what really is success here? And is this really what we're after? And part of the things that prompted that were I would recognize, hey, my evaluations are pretty good. My students come to class. They seem to be performing reasonably well on tests, some of them at least. They seem entertained. They smile. They say, hey, good job. We enjoyed your class. And so I'm thinking, I'm doing pretty well. But at the same time, I'll talk to a student a year after my class, and it's like they don't remember anything we talked about. Or I'll talk to one of my colleagues that has one of my students later, and they're having to reteach some things. And so I'm just constantly kind of rethinking, and I think many of us do this. I'm just rethinking how I do things and wondering if there's a better way. And so that's where I started. I was just looking for a better way, and I kind of stumbled into this idea of a flipped classroom that I'd heard a number of people talk about, and I just got interested. And so I started listening to folks talk at. I was at a conference a few years ago, and it was a research conference, but we had a couple of teaching sessions, and so I went to one of those, and there was someone telling his story about flipping the classroom, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, and just kind of was a fan from a distance of people doing this. And so I really kind of got into it. I started reading about it, listening to other people's stories, and I just decided, well, let's try it. Let's try it and see what happens. And so just to start out, here's what I discovered when I asked the question, well, what is this flipped classroom? So what I quickly found was, honestly, there's really no single definition. Everybody that does it defines it a little bit differently. But so for me though, what I see is some flexible model for teaching and learning that's adaptable by any specific instructor and can appropriately fit a specific course in a student group. So like for me, I'm a finance professor. So my flipped classroom is going to look very different from a flipped classroom in another discipline. One, because the types of things we're talking about are different, and two, maybe the students are at a different place in their lives. And so it's got to be very nimble. But the essence of this, kind of the common thread from just about everyone I've talked to that does this is the following. As an instructor, you take stuff from a traditional classroom and find a way to require students to do that on their own time. So for me, it was the lecture-based stuff, the stuff where I'm just kind of spilling content to them. I figured out a way to do that outside of the classroom. And then I thought about stuff that students would traditionally do outside of a traditional classroom on their own time, and do that in the classroom instead. And so this is where we get this idea of a flip, right? You're taking everything that you do inside the classroom and outside the classroom and flipping it. Okay, and so as I've talked to people, and then as I've done this, what I found is people who flip their classrooms typically do a few things. So one of the first things that folks do, and this is what I did, was to identify the core material that would otherwise just be sort of dumped in a classroom, in a lecture, that really doesn't require us to be in a room together, right? It's sort of one-way communication, and find a way to present it in a condensed form outside the traditional classroom. And condensed is the key, right? We're thinking like modular content, so short bursts of content, anywhere from 1 minute to 20 minutes, but it's certainly not, the replication of a 75-minute lecture that you just watch outside. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're finding the core material, condensing it, let the students digest it at their own pace, on their own time. So that's the first thing. The second, and this is critical, because we know that people respond to incentives, everyone's got to create an enforcement mechanism to ensure that they're actually doing this, right? Because if you give them all this material, no matter how well you packaged it, no matter how nicely it's done, if there's no enforcement mechanism for them to take this in outside the classroom, it's going to completely sabotage everything that you try to do inside the classroom. So you got to have an enforcement mechanism. And then folks who flip their classrooms then typically find some way to facilitate a lot of group discussion, a lot of activities, a lot of problem solving, a lot of application, anything that builds on that core material that they've already digested, but does so in a way that more or less requires us, and is better when we do it together. So that's conceptually the three things. Now here's how I did it. Okay, so this is me. So we're getting right into my story. So for the first part, so thinking about this core material that I poured it outside the classroom. So I already had kind of thinking about a syllabus of an existing class and my all of my material, all my notes, all of that. I thought about class meeting by class meeting. So each specific class meeting, I I took that material and I condensed it and created about a 10 to 20 minute video. And I did a screencast type stuff. So, so think those of you who are familiar with Khan Academy, that's what I thought of as my model, right? I just wanted a screen. I didn't want my face. I just wanted a screen. I wanted to be talking. I wanted to be either showing slides or writing things down. So that's what it is. So I've got all these videos. So I've got 10 to 20 minutes of content for every single regular class period. And I put them out there. And so the students are responsible to watch those prior to class. And I tell them, look, you need to, this may be a 20-minute video, but it may take you 2 hours. It may take you 20 minutes. It may take you 10 minutes on double time. I don't know. And it's going to change from time to time, but budget the time and space to do this, and pretend you're sitting in a class, with the exception that you're in control. So if you didn't get something, press pause, go back, watch it again. And I tell them to take notes and bring the notes to class with them. And some of them did it. And the ones that did it were very successful because of it. Then my enforcement mechanism. So, and again, this is back when everything was in person, right? All classes were in person. So I had the in-person class meeting. Every class meeting, I would give the students a 3 to 4 question quiz. And it was for a grade. And it was timed. It was like 1 to 2 minutes. And I just did it on Canvas. Sometimes I didn't written, sometimes I did it on Canvas, but they were, you know, these were not hard questions. They were sort of questions of the nature that if you had a pulse and you were paying attention and taking notes during the videos, you should do well. If you didn't, you're going to fail. And I wanted them to have that very quick recognition. And so that was the enforcement mechanism. And then third, in a typical class meeting. So again, this was the case where we had the regular classes in person. I'd oftentimes open the class by saying, okay, what'd you get out of the video? What do you want to talk about? What do I need to clarify? And then I'd mix the delivery of any new material with group work and things like that. Sometimes it was so simple as, and this is because finance it's got a quantitative component, but a lot of it's just very applied over and over again type stuff, and a lot of it's just doing things to kind of get the intuition. So sometimes it's just working through assigned problems, and so class looked much more like a lab setting. So that's how I did it. Again, in the pre-COVID world. Now, before I get into questions and discussion, I want to just show just the initial thing that I noticed. So here's a grade distribution. So this is a upper level finance class. We're talking juniors and seniors. This is an investments class, mostly majors. I didn't change my grading mechanism hardly at all. And so this is going from one semester to the next, the non-flipped to the flipped. And what I noticed was this, I don't know if you can see my cursor over here, but this right tail, the F's and the drops, that's what got cut off. And so I found that being pulled in. And so, you know, I had generally better performance in the A and B range. And so, you know, I think this was progress, right? I think the sort of the clueless non-participant, they figured out very quickly they just couldn't do that because the class sort of forced them to be on a pace that they needed to be on. So I was very pleased with the initial outcome. Okay, so just a few more things that I want to point out, and then we ought to be ready for questions and discussion. So some essentials for me in the way I did it. So this is what I learned was crucially important. One thing, more so than in any other classes I've taught in the past, I had to communicate expectations early and often. And when I'm talking about expectations, it was stuff like, okay, this is the way, this is what I'm going to expect you to do in preparation for every single class. And so and Igor, I'll send this document out, but it was a kind of a set of guidelines and said, okay, so when you're preparing for class, you need to do this pre-class work, then you need to do this. And then in class, we're going to do this. And then after class, here's what you're going to do. And so I would module the entire class out on Canvas, and I have a different module for every single class meeting that actually had these steps so that they were very clearly seen and articulated. And so I just drove that home over and over and over again. And it is sort of you know, people say things like trust the process. I think this was sort of a trust the process thing. So it's here, I'm giving you a process, trust the process, follow the process. If you don't follow the process, you're going to be in trouble. A second thing that I viewed as essential is to really think hard about the quizzes. These are the everyday, every class day following the video content. And this is something that I'm still thinking about. What's the purpose of the quizzes? What can we get out of these? The quizzes have never been for me to really assess students' knowledge. It's much more to get them to stay on pace so they don't get behind, and so that they could quickly self-assess. So my quizzes, they don't have a particularly high weight in the class. And we're talking 10%. So, you know, if you don't do your quizzes, you lose a letter grade, but it's not like you can get all these quizzes right and turn a D into an A. It's not that. It's much more about pacing. So that's what I was thinking. So, but I continue to think about the quizzes, because not only content, but actually how to deliver them. You can deliver them before class or during class. I liked delivering them during class at the first on these when I was doing everything in person, because it was also sort of an attendance mechanism, right? My class attendance was incredible. I mean, I had 85%, 85, 90% class attendance. And historically, I would say that was pretty darn remarkable. A third essential was, and this has always been a hard thing for me. And I realized really quickly, I cannot over program class time. It's almost like I found it less preparation on my part was more, because it allowed me to be more relaxed and interactive and let the class go where it needed to go. And the very nice thing about this flipped model was I have the ability to make sure that they have all the necessary content in the pre-class stuff. So that's what I over program. And that gives me the freedom in class to really spend an extra 20 minutes on a topic that I wouldn't normally spend on, simply because there's a few people struggling. And so I love that freedom, but it required me, you know, to go in class on a daily basis, not exactly knowing what was going to happen, which is fun, but it's also a little bit nerving. Okay, so those are my essentials. I've got some other slides here, different considerations that we can talk about, but I think what I'd like to do right now is just stop. So we're about halfway through, and I can just open up this to questions, discussions, chat, however you want to handle this, Igor. That would be totally fine.
Yeah, thank you. So we encourage participants who have questions to unmute themselves. And
yeah, I have one. Thank you, Dr. Kelley. That was really informative. My question is related to one of the key considerations that you put out there about the importance of setting expectations, because I imagine that students walking into a class, this may look very different from a lot of their other classroom experiences. And so I'm curious,
Yes.
do you ever get any students who push back on this? I think there's sometimes a concern about when you go to a flipped model that students feel as though they're no longer being taught, quote unquote.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
curious if you've had to manage those expectations from students and all, and what those conversations look like.
Yeah, I did. So when I first did this, I had a little bit of that, and it was mainly a pushback from people who had been through something similar and had a bad experience. And I think, you know, and those things are going to happen, right? I mean, when we try to innovate and do something different, sometimes it's not going to go well, and so that's understandable. And so I just the way I handled it was I tried to take the posture with the students that I'm trying something kind of different and new for their benefit, and I want to hear back from them, and I welcome the feedback, and so I'd get some of that, and when people push back, I would just ask them why they're pushing back, and just listen to them. So that helped. Another thing that helped was I would these are some of the documents that I mentioned earlier, but I have a one-page document that I gave my students well before class, and so come on in. I'm doing a brown bag back here. I had a one-page document that I give to them beforehand that kind of sets the expectations, but I do it well before class, and so I make sure the Canvas site is ready 1 to 2 weeks before the first day of class, and I start pushing material to them at that point, and try to be very selective about what I give them when. But that kind of sets the context. And then the other thing that I like to do is give some discussion, just very brief to them, kind of like I gave it the first today, about saying things like, you know what, I've been doing this for a while, and I'm looking for a better way. And I found that posture goes a long way also. After the fact, yeah, there's always going to be some comments on the evaluations, like this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But I will say you know, with stuff like this, we got to look at the, you know, take the positive, take the negative, sift through it. The response on average has been incredibly positive.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Along those lines, there's another question in the chat from Amy. She wants to know if you use rubrics to communicate expectations to students.
I'm not by that name, but Amy, do you want to can you elaborate a little more on exactly what you're asking? Because the answer may actually be maybe I do.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yes. I guess I took an IDP class over the year last year, and they encouraged me to start using rubrics, which I'd never used before, where for every assignment, it's for asynchronous teaching, but for every assignment, there's a rubric that explains exactly what I expect of the students and gives them points for all of, it's a way of communicating to them what they're getting credit for. But I've actually found myself really sort of in love with rubrics all of a sudden.
Gotcha.
I never used them before, but now I realize they're kind of a way of talking. But again, I'd say
Gotcha.
I'm not with them. So I just was wondering if that was the
yes. So I don't do it on a like an assignment by assignment basis. I do it more broadly. So more broadly in the sense of because really they have what we're doing is incredibly simple, right? There's pre-class stuff, there's quiz stuff, there's in-class stuff, there's after-class stuff. And so broadly, I say here's kind of the expectations for pre-class stuff, and that's going to apply for all of this. But it's not on a point by point basis. But the nice thing is, now that I've got this structure in place, if I want to play with something like that, it's very easy. I mean, what I found, as I go from one semester to the next, I don't want to change many things just because I think part of it is just managing the mess, but part of it is, I mean, truly is a sort of a scientific way of going about things. I really want to know what matters. So I don't want to change many things at a time, but I have the ability, roll in two or three changes each semester and just play with it, see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I actually agree with Amy. The use of rubrics is a very effective way to communicate expectation to students. I have one question for you, Eric. You said that we need to think hard about quizzes, and I wonder when you create your videos, have you used Panopto or Studio, because these two allow you to embed quizzes in video?
I have not. Part of that is just my learning process. So I learned how to use Camtasia, and so this is actually, let me scoot over, and Camtasia actually has this technology as well with the embedding of quizzes. See, importing consideration. Yeah, so I think anybody that wants to do this needs to. I think it's worth investing in some video editing software. So again, I use Camtasia, so that's how I create all my videos. The first time I did this, I was just trying to get through it, and so I was kind of nervous about embedding things in there. And then for me, I have big, oftentimes pretty big sections, and so I'm very, very concerned with the ability to connect things into Canvas and make sure everything is all in sync. And so I've been really nervous about doing those things. But I like that. I like that idea. That lets you, I think there's a couple of different philosophies, and I've really only played with the latter. But one philosophy would be to do the embedding thing. And so you got a 10-minute video and you got a quiz question every 2 minutes. And so while they're doing the videos, then they're going through the quizzes. Another one is to have the quiz completely separate for the video. I did that. Part of my reasoning for that is I just wanted to have these as completely separate components, so that going forward, if I ever wanted to just use videos and not quizzes, or I want to change the quiz, it just made a little more sense to me. But that's a kind of a long-winded answer for that. So really, I haven't used it, but it's not because it's bad, or I don't think it's worthwhile.
I understand. I think you need a subscription to use Camtasia, and then Studio and Panopto are supported by OIT. Right. I think they are offered free to faculty. Yeah.
Right. And so I did this before we had Panopto. And I'd watched some videos on doing stuff with Camtasia. And I will say, you can do a lot more in Camtasia than you can in Studio. I don't know about Panopto, but you can with Camtasia. And so I kind of got into this video editing thing, and I just liked it. My process was tied to it. Panopto is about $200 for a lot. I'm sorry, Camtasia is about $200 for a license. Lasts you 2 years, but yes, definitely.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We have about 2 minutes left before Eric goes to teach his class. Oh, there's a comment in the chat from Tanya. She said she teaches Camtasia if anyone would like to connect with her. Tanya, you saying? So
I will say that is, I mean, if you're interested in doing anything that's a screencast type video, you'll go a long way if you just learn something. Camtasia is one of those. It's great. There's a bit of a learning curve, but after you've done it for a few weeks, you get up on that curve, and it's amazing the types of things that you can start creating.
Thanks. All right. If we do not have any other questions or comment, I would like to thank all of you for being here today and really in particular Dr. Wang and Dr. Kelley for your great session today. And FYI, our next session is on October 22nd. It's a faculty panel, and we will appreciate it. Finally, we will appreciate it if you fill out our survey and let us know what we're doing well, what you would like to see in the future. And then if you're interested in leading a session for us for spring, feel free to email me or anybody else in OLAP. Thank you, everyone, and happy Friday.